Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever part of the country you are in. Thank you for joining the Daily LightPoint. I'm Dr. Don, and today I want to lean a little deeper into this conversation around execution that we've been sharing all week. And if you recall, we had an earlier podcast, maybe a week or so ago. Well, it was more of a Daily LightPoint that spoke about breakthroughs require breaking. And a few asked me, well, when you say breaking, what are you breaking? Right. And we spoke about that at a high level, but I want to talk about breaking in the context of execution. And one of the things that I've encountered in order to realize where your barriers may be to effectively executing against this thing that you're striving to achieve or accomplish or implement personally or professionally, it requires a level of humility. So when we talk about breaking or a breakthrough, the breakthrough at a really deep and personal level is fostering a sense of humility around oneself, one's ability to execute in the first place. Because if we don't move with a space of truth around our capabilities and our potential barriers, then we're never going to realize the breakthrough to maximize our potential for execution. But I think it's really important to talk about the distinction between a fear response versus humility. How do you distinguish fear in oneself and others versus true practice of humility? And some believe when they hear the term humility or synonyms tied to humility, like humbleness, they think that that means a minimization of oneself, when in fact, humility is not minimizing oneself in terms of reality and truth. Humility requires one to actually acknowledge their own strengths, weaknesses, and in-betweens. Humility requires the recognition of one's impact and one's barriers. Humility ensures that one is also conscious of those things in and around them that influence successes and failures. That's real humility. Whereas a fear response is when an individual minimizes oneself or their capabilities for fear of being seen or unseen. Let's get after that. The fear of being seen or unseen often is manifested through what they will try to present as humility. Let me give you an example of that. If you find yourself being or receiving an accolade about a work outcome or an accomplishment, and you find yourself saying, well, it was really a team effort. Now, some may say, oh, wow, they're so humble. They show so much humility. And yes, while it's important to acknowledge that others took part in the success of that thing, if someone wants to give you your flowers as well for your specific contribution, accepting that, receiving it, and then deciding, thank you, I worked really hard. I really tried to be a great team player and contribute. And I also want to acknowledge those who took part in that success. That is humility. But the fear response would be, oh, wow, it was really just a team effort. Right? It may present as humbleness or humility, when in fact that's a fear response. Another example of fear versus humility is maybe your team is addressing some challenges or concerns, and you recognize and using that as validation for performance failures. And because you recognize that you may have not provided all the tools and resources for success, or you felt like you could have done more, a fear response would be to kind of lean into the delusionment or the denial that's presented by the team and their actions, versus humility says, guys, I feel like I could have equipped you better. However, with that, I also want to acknowledge that there were failure points with you all or with an individual relating to the outcome as well. We have to move in a space of truth and reality in order to realize the breakthrough that we need. So I leave you with this. Understand that as part of execution requires us to operate with a level of humility. And in order to do so, having a pulse on our fear response versus true humility is important. Ask yourself, be it in reflection of oneself or as you observe others in and around you, is what they're embodying a fear response or a true humility response? And if you believe it's centered in fear, how do you begin to unpack those fear responses and disarm them so that you can truly move with a space that says, I recognize my strengths and my opportunities. I'm going to lean into both of those things. That's where the real power is. That's where the real magic is. With that being said, thank you for tuning into our daily Light Point, the Light Point podcast. Real leaders, real talk, real time.